Welcome back to the Stratford Vibe Exchange. I'm Karim Rushdy. We're filming in Fresh and Free Studios inside of Nancy Campbell Academy, downtown Stratford, Ontario. Today I have the great honor and pleasure of welcoming my own brother, Ashraf Rushdy. How are you, Habibi?
Kwayas, alhamdulillah.
Ah,
Doing great. Nice to see you all.
so just a few hours ago, or maybe it was last night, you brought up that we performed in this building
Yeah,
when there was a cafe called International Grounds
that's right.
in the building.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. I can't remember exactly when, but
And yeah, it would have been a long time ago. And so that means that we've been connected to Stratford and this building for quite some time. That just was a kind of a shocker to me because I thought, oh yeah, my bro's here, it'll be cool and new. But it's like, actually,
we've been here.
yeah, we've been here. Exactly. We're doing our thing.
Yeah.
So last night we came and you recorded the most fire verse
I mean,
of all time.
it was a great verse. It was a lot of fun.
And we
It
were
was a good studio.
laughing a lot.
Yeah, man.
When's the last time you recorded in a studio that you remember?
The last time I remember recording in a studio was, I mean, aside from the like mobile thing that you set up in my house.
Yeah, with the sock on the mic?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aside from that situation, oh man, I can't even remember. It's
That's how
actually
long it's
like,
been.
yeah, it's been
Yeah.
a long time.
That makes sense.
Maybe
then
like
the,
20 years ago.
oof.
I'm that old.
Respect.
No, maybe 15, 17 years ago.
Let's go 15. Yeah, 15.
Yeah,
Yeah, a cool fit. 16,
Yeah.
17.
a long time.
But I teach high school, so I'm always reminded how old I am.
Yeah, that's it.
But then when you go hang out with people who actually are elderly, you get reminded how young you are. So it's all perspective
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So here on this podcast, I called it Stratford Vibe Exchange, where artists, business leaders, and such can come together on this forum and talk about how their artistry and their expertise are contributing to the community, to community building. And this is an area that you have some learning in, some experience in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to humble you down because I would hype you up way too much. So I'm trying to just say, keep it chill. But you're actually doing your Ph.D. in, what was it again?
Adult education and community development.
Which is super exciting.
Yeah.
So, and of course, we have our Chat GPT section. Don't worry, everyone. We'll get to the Chat GPT
I'm interested
when
to
it's
see
time.
what it's going to
Yeah,
say.
me too. And then I think we might have some beatboxing that might happen.
You never know.
Well, you never know when the bros unite. But can you tell us a little bit about that PhD study that you're doing and if possible, relate it back to how us as artists in Stratford can apply some of that, which we maybe will get to later. But
Yeah.
what
for
is
sure.
what is it a bit about what you've been
Yeah,
researching?
maybe I can share a little bit generally and then a
And
little
then
bit what you're
dive deep.
saying. Yeah, so I mean the area of my focus in adult education and community development is in workplace learning. And you could define that a lot of ways, but if you think about work really broadly as just activity that people are doing, then you could say that whether you're paid or not for whatever activity you're doing, that's kind of like work that you're doing. So if you're at home with your kids, if you're freestyling with a group, if you're at work where you're getting paid to do work, all of that would be considered work. This right now you could consider
Yeah, we're at work.
you're at work,
This is
right?
work.
This is- so if you think about workplace learning that way, then learning, it's happening everywhere, right? There's some kind of like social sort of embedded learning in all of our activities. So that's kind of like in very general terms, like the area that I'm interested in doing a lot of research in. And I'm at the point now where in the PhD program where I have to like propose the study that I'm going to do. And so I have like a bunch of ideas in that direction. But I think that related to what you're doing here, a lot of times these ideas of community, when you start to really think about community, and it's sort of like hidden inside community is this thing about identity and like who we are. So anytime you try to figure something out about community development, you have to answer these questions about who we are. So something about identity and how you approach that. And then there's also this stuff about like this activity or practice. Like, so what people are actually doing is part of who they are and part of who they think they are and part of how they are with other people. And then another element that's connected that I think, might be relevant here is this idea also of just language and like how much do we have shared language, which lets us kind of operate as a community.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a few, like, those are some central concepts that I just think are like,
yeah, no, it's amazing.
connected.
And that's not just language like you speak English and I speak English.
Yeah.
You're talking about languages in
Language, like, even if everybody spoke the same language, people who operate in a community tend to have like terms that everybody understands in the same way.
right.
And then like
I spit hot fire.
like
If
I spit hot fire. That's exactly.
If you're not in that world,
then you wouldn't
you
know
say what is going on.
what's going on, right?
That sounds dangerous.
Exactly.
So,
So,
like you said, some people drop bars. You raise the bar.
sometimes some people raise them. That's
Yeah.
right. So, but if you didn't know what dropping bars means, then you
You don't even get the
kind of
joke.
meaningless.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that. So language, but
Mm.
then when you have different groups, there's like within what people do, there's this idea of like a community of practice. So maybe a bunch of artists all share a set of ideas in a certain area, and they understand each other well. But then people who are engaged, like you said, local businesses in Stratford. So like, do business owners understand artists and the way that they're thinking
Right,
about the
right.
development of their community, right? And so when those things when people can't speak to each other across even some of those like professional boundaries or identities, then they struggle to build community together if they don't have an accessible language for everyone.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting because we just had Jeff Wood, shout out Jeff Wood, on the podcast, and he was mentioning that here locally, a lot of businesses are actually doing marketing and ad campaigns that only represent one type of person. But for him as a media creative and professional, he values diversity, and he feels that representation with different types of people is very important. So
Yeah.
he said him and Selena have had to have these conversations with local business leaders that not only is it like probably a good idea to do this, but it'd be even better for business because there is diversity in our town. But so I don't know, that seems like
that's
up that alley.
But yeah, so that would have an impact of like who lives, like from the people who live in the community, who feels like they actually belong here or are part of the community. If the identity of the people of Stratford is only one kind of person who lives in the city.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
like when artists, and whenever an artist like makes a piece and they present it, like that tells people about who they are a lot of times. Like when we make music, when we write rhymes, like we're also saying something about who we think we are and what we think is good in the world, and like some of these things that we're expressing.
Yeah.
Even this podcast, like who you choose to bring onto the podcast, or I don't know, it's probably a matter of time for you just until you have every single person that you can to come out and share, share their perspective, but it like reflects back to the community, what's going on in the community, like news stories, this kind of stuff. So I feel like it all is contributing to people's imagination of like, who is this city for? What does it look like?
Right. It seems to me that in our society generally, but also here in Stratford, the concept of building unity of vision is maybe recognized as important, but the evidence of it actually being established is rare, and in my limited experience. So what does this work that you're doing and experience that you've had, what insights have you gained in people coming from different areas with different values, different language, yada, yada, but being able to build a unity of vision?
Just small questions only on this podcast. I take it.
Well, we just keep it light.
You
It's
just keep
like,
like, yeah, I think.
I just told him we were gonna beatbox.
Yeah, exactly.
And hang out and have a coffee. But
That's it.
I don't know.
No, I mean, that's a great question. I think that there's a few different things that I could draw on to share, like some of what I've seen and some of what I've experienced. So maybe like one thing that is like still following on this train from like the area of study in adult education is like you're concerned with like people in order to build unity of vision. Let's say like people do need, like we were talking about before, common language. So they need some terms that let them understand each other. And then they also need structures that let them meet in a way, like that let them actually bring them in spaces like physically or virtually, but actually like interact together enough to build understanding over time. And then I think there's a lot in adult education that also addresses like social movements and like how people, whether and how people decide to like get engaged, or not with some social movement or another that might contribute to a certain perspective being brought to the fore. But I think that probably more practically, my experience in this area has to do with engagement with the activities of the Baha'i community. So that's like around the world, like a lot of people trying to do this exact thing that you said, like building unity of vision in a community. And that really looks like, it looks like creating like all those things that I mentioned before from adult education, but it looks like creating context where people can actually consult together. So I think consultation as a principle, and consultation, like when people hear that word, sometimes they think that it just means like asking somebody for their opinion, or it means like,
I was gonna say break that down.
Or it just means like that you've made a little space where people came and they got a chance to share their like unhappy thoughts about whatever it is that you're doing, and then you kind of carry on. I think that a lot of people try to engage in development projects, a lot of people that try to engage in a lot of efforts at municipal levels of government face a lot of difficulty making that thing of consultation really real. But I think that consultation, in the way that I've seen it sort of brought up in the Baha'i community, at least in those spaces, is like this principle where you sort of understand that everybody has a perspective, kind of come together in a space, and you each have a chance to share like what you think about a topic or what you think is important for the community to do at a certain time. But you're also not attached to your opinion, where I think like that part of like preparation in order to consult well is missing from a lot of spaces, because what people feel like a lot of the time to reach, a state where everybody recognizes this important thing that one group has to share or another, is like you have to just really push for your ideas to get in. Right. And if you don't push, then they're not going to get in. And, justifiably and understandably, a lot of people, if they don't push, their ideas don't get in. But I think that part of that is also from the like, just the poor nature of the spaces that we're able to create. So if we want to see like more authentic consultation between different groups in our local communities, or at any level, I think that part of it has to be this like preparation of the individuals who are going to participate in that kind of conversation, to be ready to like share their ideas and be seeking truth with others, which is not it's not forcing others to agree with you. It's not, any of that kind of stuff. I think that that's like one thing, maybe one insight, is like that the Baha'i community sort of has promoted that idea, and I've seen that work in a lot of contexts. But that also includes a whole bunch of other associated ideas about like, who do I think you are, or like other human beings. Like we have to have a little bit of like, you need education basically in a community for people to be able to participate in their community. Wow. Yeah.
You said a lot of amazing things.
Yeah, I just
no, it was great.
The question was intense. I felt like I had to go for it.
So was the answer. But you hit on many things. One thing was what I thought of was the loudest voice in the room is the one that is heard, you know. And we experience that all the time here at the school at Nancy Campbell, where there are certain personalities that when they speak, people kind of go along with whatever they said. That doesn't mean that what they said reflects the majority feeling of the group. And some people only have the courage to share it after the fact. So talking about those spaces, we have to work every single day to try and edit and change and adjust the spaces that we create. That's why we have a school assembly every single day. Yeah. Because we know that it's not, you can't just gather people a couple times and then you'll create the right environment. Yeah. You have to be gathering as frequently as possible and constantly reflecting on what's working, what isn't working. Are people feeling comfortable? Are people sharing their voices? Are they not? You know, why did we ask a question to the school and no one answered? No one was comfortable to talk. Okay, that's on us. And that's what I had Mr. Naylor on the chat. Shout out Mr. Gordon Naylor. He was saying this concept that we can't blame the youth. Yeah, that actually we are the architects of the environment. Yeah. And so it's on us. If it's not working for them, we need to reflect, well, what did we do? And what are we going to do differently? Yeah. Which is powerful. And it leads back to what you were saying about being detached from your own opinion. So he's being detached from his own education method. You know, he's always changing what the way he's doing it. And I'm inspired by that. And I'm inspired by what you just said, too. So I also thought of a song earlier that I'll share now. You said any kind of work is activity, and I thought of work. Yeah, that was a quick little moment. We needed to have. And I think that we've reached a point in the podcast where we must turn to artificial intelligence because it's fun.
All right, okay.
So I told it a little bit about you, like not that much.
Okay.
And then I said, give me 10 profound questions.
Okay, yeah.
And they are actually quite profound. So if you thought mine were deep, let's go.
Let's go.
Can you share with us, let me just move this here, actually. Can you share with us the key principles or theories that underpin your research in adult education and community development, particularly in the context of workplace learning? I feel like you answered that.
I did, yeah.
You did. Kinda. Next.
I'm in situated learning theory.
Okay, here's a good one, a little more personal. What inspired you to pursue a Ph.D. in this field, and what do you hope to achieve through your research? Whoa.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I, a lot of my work actually for the past like 8 years, maybe even a little bit longer, has been with a program run by the Institute for Studies in Global Prosperity that accompanies Baha'i University students through their undergraduate studies. So it's like a 4-year program. There's these kind of 10-day intensive seminars that build on each other year by year. And I just been serving with that program for a long time, trying to figure out whatever we can do to strengthen our ability to create sort of spaces that are really going to uplift, spaces that are sort of, that really open the mind, that really help youth consider how they're going to use what they're learning to serve their communities, like all that kind of stuff. And I think I was just feeling at some point like I was sort of running up against my own limitations. And then I was like, I need some help to go a little further, like grew a lot by just trying to do that work. And then I think that part of my inspiration to go into a PhD program was to do that. And then I think that on the other hand, I was sort of realizing that overall, like there's so much research that's being done. And I don't know, like if it's something you would closely follow, but there's a lot of also retractions of research that are going on, like people realizing that studies that have been done haven't been done very well, or people have been like, there's like there's all kinds of stuff that's just out there. And then there's, and then there's these sort of deeper questions in social sciences about people's frameworks, like how they kind of think about society and people shaping the kinds of questions that they're going to ask about society and people. Wow. So yeah, to just get an understanding, to like try and like gain more of an understanding of that, I also felt like it would be helpful to learn how to do some research at a sort of higher level and kind of go through that process myself. So part of it is really just to become better equipped for the work that I'm already, like some of the work I was already doing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So you can ask questions within questions. Like,
You
let's
know.
think about society and people. No, let's think about how people are thinking about society and people. I love it. I love it.
It's like that. That's right.
That's amazing. Can you share any specific examples or case studies where workplace learning has had a transformative impact on individuals, organizations, or the wider community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty strong recognition in sort of business communities that learning in the workplace is something that, like I was saying, that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're either conscious of that or not. As a business leader, as a, owner of a business, whatever size the business is, you're either aware that people are learning all the time or you're not. And then you're either doing things that promote that or not. And I think that there's just there's huge seas of research. Like people have just published and published on all these kinds of examples, but maybe like where workplace learning has been transformative, I think there's there's a book I was reading recently where they gave this example of somebody who was in Nepal and trying to work with increasing the number of women who are participating in local politics. And and they're part of this sort of extended network across Asia, Southeast Asia, where people would try to learn together about the nature of their work, right?
Right.
So then, like part of what that story, how it unfolds, is that by these kinds of things that we were talking about, the attention to the kinds of spaces that were created to bring people together, and the preparation that people had when they come, and the experience that they even have in that space, like how much when you come to a meeting, like a lot of times when people hear the word meeting, they're like, they have bad feelings right away.
Yeah,
they're
sounds like it's going to be boring,
like
terrible.
Yeah, when I say
leave.
meeting, people, right? There's like
Yeah.
Dilbert comics or whatever. There's like stuff that's in the background that just makes that term feel bad, but it doesn't have to be that way. So then it's like people really intentional about the kinds of spaces they're arranging, these kinds of things. Then this, so in this one example, this person comes as like a representative of their team, or they come with a few other people from their team. They have this experience in India where they get a chance to see what somebody else is doing. And then they're assisted to kind of go back and not replicate what they saw, but to use the things that they saw that were really helpful in their own area to like a really great effect. Like, so they could, some of the effects that are kind of measurable. And I would say like anything where the participation of women in any field of society increases is transformative. And so you can see kind of like how those
100%.
Yeah, like how those things impact sort of every level, like in the family unit, and then the sort of culturally, like there's all these different things. So just thinking like very specifically of a workplace, I know that's a kind of a distant example for Stratford, but
no, but it's like you said, they went and they learned from somewhere else, and it's not exactly the same. So you're not copy pasting you're just gleaning or learning that insight and then reflecting on how it can apply to your reality
and what sorts of things can actually apply.
Right.
And anytime where people go and they learn something, even within a business, one department, somebody goes and they learn how to do something from another department. If they come back and they try and just copy the thing, it's very like usually leads to more problems than it does assist people. Like to say that somebody's learned something, because you have to recognize that anytime somebody's engaged in activity that's doing well, it's not just the action that makes that work. It's like the nature of the relationships that exist in the space, the kind of culture that contributes to that action, the kind of like shared sense that everybody has together. So you can't just go and learn like how to do a certain action and then bring it back somewhere else. You have to kind of learn the set of things that are connected to that action that enable it.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's exciting. That's some deep stuff.
ChatGPT
led us there. No, you led us there. We led each other.
Yeah.
The three of us. The four of us with Victor. So I think I'll ask you one more ChatGPT
All right.
question for fun, and then let's do some beatboxing.
I love it.
Yeah, okay, sick. Okay, let's go to the last one. And it put this one at the end, which is really smart. Looking ahead,
Okay.
what are your aspirations for applying your research findings and contributing to the field that you're in? And how do you envision making a positive impact in your community and beyond?
Oh, that's also big.
Yeah, yeah.
Well done. Well done,
How much
ChatGPT.
reflection have you been doing about the future? Or
Uh,
are you just on the grind,
no.
day to day, hustle, which I know you have been.
Yeah, all the time, but
there
also
may be some reflection in
yeah,
there.
I don't think I think if we don't think about the future, if we don't think about our reasons for doing things, then our actions become kind of purposeless. So for me, that thing of what is it for, I think is a really big one. And I've tried when you're in a Ph.D. program, you have to apply for funding all the time.
Oh,
And I'm always trying to express why I think it's important, but I'm always just too excited about the ideas. And so I spend more of my word count in those applications writing about how cool an idea is. And at the end, I'm like, oh, it could be really good this and that way. But I actually have some thoughts on it. So one of the things is so part of my research, this is the part I didn't get into, was like the specific thing. But part of my research is to take a model that someone's developed to measure a little bit or create a framework that helps you gauge how learning flows. So, so you have a group that meets together and then, they all go live their different lives. Like, how do you know how much of that one conversation, if it's this sort of social learning space, how much of that flows to other spaces in their lives? Like, why would they apply something in their family or not? Or why would they apply something in another workplace or not? Like we said, this one person, that example I gave, they came and brought stuff and applied it. So why, right?
Yeah.
Why did they do that? So this person has developed, or these researchers have developed a model. And my research is just to test the model and to see how well it works and sort of if there are any gaps, if there's anything that could be contributed that strengthens it. But the reason I want to do that is because I think that more and more, not just businesses who see the economic benefit of knowing about learning, and not just individuals who see for their own advancement, the more you learn, the better equipped you are to do different things in the world, but that communities, I think, need to become conscious of how they promote learning environments in the community.
Wow.
And so I think that in order for that to be accessible, kind of at a community level, you need models that help us understand a little bit how learning actually works for a community.
Right.
And so in the long term, I think the implications of having sort of better understandings of how learning actually works for us in a community will enable a lot of communities to learn their way out of problems that they face. So I think it's a pretty broad set of applications. It's like if you're facing kind of any sort of difficult condition, it's kind of like you have to be able to gain a sense of what you need to know. Like everyone needs to share a sense of what they need to know and then how they go about gaining more access to the kind of knowledge that they need. So I think if you were to take a community like Stratford, it would be hard to say that there's a shared sense in the community of what knowledge is missing, right?
Right.
It'd be hard to even say much of what knowledge is present. I mean, maybe there's a lot of small businesses and larger businesses that have learned to weather a seasonal cycle of tourism. There's there's a lot of actors and actresses. There's a lot, there's just a lot going on in the city in that way. But so there's certain things you might be able to say, and a bunch of the other industries that are here as well. So you could say based on how much sort of, a read of maybe the business bureau and all these different things, who's actually here, you could say something about the knowledge that's there. But you might not be able to say how much people really understand about their own population. How much do people actually know about who we are all together? Or
because you can't know that unless
you can't
you've
know
taken
that
action
unless you've exposed it
to it.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you've tried to do that. So I feel like being able to explore these kinds of models provide a way, I think, even for like municipal governments or, you know, groups, networks of people who work together to think about like, well, how can we make explicit what we know and what we don't know and what we're learning about? And then, you know, your connections to other communities become a little more purposeful. Because you're like, oh, we really need to know about this thing. And it's not just sort of driven by, you know, one or another agenda. It's actually kind of like, well, what do we as a community, you know, need to know? So I feel like it's in that direction. I mean, it's not firm, but it's like, I think that unlocks a lot for a lot of different, I mean, all institutions, but for a lot of communities, that it's sort of strengthens their ability to develop.
That's huge. I'm really excited for where you go with that.
Me too.
In your life. Hey, that's Thanks, it's a really wild thing. It's, to me, it's revolutionary, basically. You know, that all the concepts that you were just sharing. And if you can find ways to apply that in action, I think that's the rare thing. A lot of people are exploring concepts and theories, and we were talking about this earlier. Yeah. But when you actually put something into practice, into action with intention and discipline and perseverance, that's when real learning happens and real change. Yeah. And so, and that can be true for even a small concept, you know, like you should love your neighbor. You know, okay, so let's try it. Do I love my neighbor? Oh, I don't even know my neighbor's name. So, okay, oops, you know, that's, you know, how do I love someone I don't know, you know? Yeah. And maybe that's possible. You see what I mean? But when you take action towards it, let me get to know my neighbor first. Boom, boom, boom. Then you start learning. Then you start finding out it's so easy to love my neighbor. This person's amazing. Yeah. Right? And whereas before maybe you had your other thoughts. And so similar with transforming communities for them to take ownership of their own learning and move past deep issues that are embedded maybe even through generations. That's a huge process, but it can only begin with action, you know? Yeah. But it also, I think, begins with concept, begins with in the mind, right? We need to think first. And so you're really progressing through that capacity to think, like you said, on these deeper levels and understand more and what's been done and what hasn't been done and yada, 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 and then to take that action. And you are taking action as well, a lot of action. So I'm so grateful you're here, bro. Oh, also, man. Just selfish to see you. It's fun. Yeah. It's
so good.
And you had shared that yesterday you did some beatboxing and then you did a spoken word out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think you should do that spoken word.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're down, if it's in your mind. But first, let's do some back and forth beatbox.
All right. Okay. All right.
Okay. So I'll do a beat and then you do a beat.
Okay.
Because people might not know, but we're brothers. So we've known each other our entire lives. Well, actually, you've known me my entire life. Yeah, that's right. I've known you for almost your whole life.
Yeah.
Because you are older, to set the record straight. Some people think I'm older. And I told this story on an episode, I forget which one, that Mom pulled the plug on the cable TV.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were all fighting over the... Yeah. And then that's when the beatboxing emerged for us. And so we used to just sit around and beatbox and listen to Rozelle and try to do it, and it was amazing. And then I also shared that I got into rap mostly because of Arlen, who wrote a rap, and I couldn't believe that he's just a regular dude, and he wrote a rap. And so I was like, if he can do it, I can do it. And then right after that was you guiding me in the raps that you wrote. And I even told a story on here. I've been talking about you a lot.
Oh, my goodness.
I told one story about how you were reading like the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita and the Kitabi Akdas and all the holy books. And then you wrote like a 9-page spoken word rap thing. And I read it and I was blown away. And then like a week or two later, I asked you, like, can I read that again? You're like, oh, I lost it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that. That's right.
So that's like the Ash style.
Yeah.
And then my style is like I'll just obsess over how a lyric sounds more than what's being said. But you sat me down and drew those arrows.
Yeah, I remember that too.
And you said, this is how you're writing now. And there's all these different little arrows. And they were pointed in the same direction, but they were different. And you said, like, your writing sounds cool, but it's disjointed, and this is what you need to become. And you drew one big arrow, and that did a lot for me. Like maybe I'm a visual learner, because if you would have just said it, I would have said, yeah, whatever. But you drew it, and then I still have that image in my head every time I go to write. So I want to thank you for that and guiding me in that writing process, and also sharing it here in case other people are trying to write and having that sort of issue, that you can have that solid arrow. Anyways, I said we'd beatbox, and I started talking more.
That's all right. Just before we go on,
yeah.
Visual learner, funny thing, doesn't exist.
Oh. Okay, what do you mean?
Everybody on the podcast who's listening, who's watching, can Google neuromyths.
Oh.
And it's actually like a thing. It's like in teacher training, it's all this kind of stuff, but it's actually not a thing at all.
Okay, so
like we're all visual learners, we're all auditory learners, we all learn using our senses and whatever, but the idea of like some people categorically being visual learners is like,
oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing
sharing
the facts.
We gotta circulate
your own
the
facts
knowledge,
and then
go
learn your knowledge.
Check it out.
But this is how it
do your research.
This is how it begins.
This is what I understand.
Okay, so that's wild. Like, cause I teach, I'm an educator, and I've actually never heard someone say that.
I know,
but I have heard people say, "Oh, she's a visual learner, and he's an audio learner, and yada yada yada." So are there different types of learners, or some who lean towards a way? Or are you saying just to say that person can only learn visually is?
I think the way we commonly use the terms is actually just like they call them neuromyths for a reason. It's not an actual thing, but it's kind of like, it's just a bit of a, it's almost like superstitious thinking.
Okay.
It's just kind of like an imagination of a thing. Like the way that it gets used in education, where you start categorizing people according to certain things, is like a step away from a certain set of experiments that were actually done on, like brain states, for example.
Okay.
But like the way that people connected the line from the brain state to a category of people who are visual or auditory or kinesthetic learners or whatever, that line breaks down. Like it's not a solid line that connects the two. So it's like there's a reality of a set of terms here that people use to define an identity, and then there's actual like how our brains work over here, and they're not those are not connected in that way that people think they are.
And talk about drawing a line. You just built a new pathway in my brain. I'm serious. So thankfully it's the summer, so I can reflect on this before the school year starts.
Before the school year begins.
And it's not that I was doing that too much, but, you do tend to sometimes put students in a little box and saying, I think they mostly learn like that.
Like this. Yeah.
But then I also know another truth, that if a student is not happy, they're not really going to learn anything.
Yeah.
Anyways, so focusing on, who they are as a person, what they might be going through right now.
Yeah.
And connecting with them on a personal level, and building that connection, then they trust you. So even if they're sad, they may be able to share that with you or whatever, and we can work through that. Right. So then they're open to learn, because I don't see teaching as I'm filling up that empty cup of a human. I see teaching as I need to guide that person to teach themselves, right? They need to uncover those hidden gems within them.
Right.
I'm holding gems. And so that's powerful. So thanks for breaking that myth on this episode.
On this podcast.
That's amazing.
I love it.
So here's a beat.
All right. Like copying.
No,
Going
just
back?
just sharing. Just sharing.
All right. All right.
Stratford Vibe Exchange.
Exchanging vibes.
Exchanging vibes. Well, I think the vibes have been exchanged.
Yo, beautiful.
And we could probably talk all day.
For our whole lives, we've been doing it.
That's true. And we need to get to our daughter's play at the Playmakers thing. They're doing Robin Hood. It's going to be super cute.
It's
so
happening
we gotta go
right away.
And thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Ashraf for joining me. Habibs.
Thanks, bro.
Peace out. That was fun, man. Thank you.
Well,
It's okay. We're still friends.
we're still friends. You just owe me $500.
So I always joke that I think it stopped recording.
Did it?
No, I always joke that.
Oh, that's fun.
But I was thinking that